Hi everyone, welcome to the IGDA Winnipeg Twitch stream for the Games We Love event. This is the first stream we've done as IGDA Winnipeg, and with that we actually had a little technical glitch in terms of recording the original show. 90% of it was salvaged, so 90% of this video is going to be the authentic original broadcast of the event. However, the opening and the first talk were lost in the recording process, so these are being redone. And I'm not going to pretend like this is the original opening, though we are trying to like emulate it as much as possible. Because it's being redone, that means that we're able to address something that was asked of us in the Twitch stream, an acknowledgement that I'm going to do right now. And this is something that we are going to continue to do after a discussion post-event with future IGDA Winnipeg events. And the acknowledgement is this. We would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, including all the broadcasters since they're all from Winnipeg. And this is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Obje Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'd also like to thank the volunteers who worked on this stream. The stage manager was Cam DeMel, and he helped everything run smoothly. The one other little tweak to this event, other than the redone openings, is that I'm going to be cutting some of the dead air time as we were like onboarding and offboarding speakers. But even with that, there was a lot of logistical things in the background that Cam helped handle that really made it run smoothly. I would also like to thank Shane Scott, who did the Discord configuration and everything to make sure our process worked, and the graphics, which was done by Christian Emil Miranda. Both my slide graphics as well as the overall interface for the Twitch stream were done by him through Zenfry, which is the company that I help run. The overall event was organized by myself and Daniel Voth. Daniel Voth is going to be introducing everybody but the first speaker because we lost his opening. I'll introduce the first speaker for this. And did a lot of stuff, working very hard that the night of the stream to host and deal with all the controls on the Twitch broadcast. Our hope as co-chairs, Daniel Voth and I, is that this stream represents a new era of IGDA Winnipeg. And I'll get into more on that in a moment. Finally, during the live broadcast, the outro and intro music, but for the sake of this sort of videoed version of it, this recorded version, just the outro music, is courtesy of Peg Jam Radio, which is an organization organized by Julian Butel, and he got the clearances from every single artist that is going to be in the broadcast to make sure that we had permission to use their music. And it's all, again, from Winnipeg. Everything tonight is from Winnipeg, which is great. Each of the details for the people I mentioned will be shown at the end of the broadcast, and I encourage you to follow them. You know, the more the community is interconnected, the stronger we will be. So me, I'm Cory King. I'm the co-founder of Zenfry, as well as a co-chair of IGDA Winnipeg. I actually have volunteered for IGDA Winnipeg, you know, maybe 3-4 years ago, back when Noah was still the chair, and we both sort of handed it off at around the same time due to various reasons. But I sort of, in the time since I've been wanting to help the community and have a place to really put my energy into that. And I always love the IGDA events. They used to be more frequent, but you know, the talks, the accessibility, the postmortems for local games being made, all of that stuff I loved, and I feel like it's that's, as a platform, it's been somewhat diminished. And so I really, when Dan basically Daniel came to me and asked, you know, if there's some way I would like to help with the community, and he offered up this role, I took it up immediately. And with being involved, there's a few things that we were going to try to handle right at the outset within, you know, this year, essentially, including building a website specific for the organization, doing a lot of the back end documents and filings and things like that to make it an organization that's able to receive donations and raise other kinds of funds, and basically allow it to grow. And once we've got that set up, then our hope is to start really letting other voices in once it has a sort of full formalized structure. But essentially, we want to make sure that we can operate this organization in a professional, high quality way. And with that, we need to make sure we have the infrastructure to do that, essentially. So, you know, as IGDA has been a little bit dormant, and even if you remember before, what are we about exactly? Well, our mission is to support and empower game developers in Manitoba by building a strong community and increasing awareness of the local industry. Now, the community is already very strong, and there's so many great events, including like Peg Jam, which is run by Daniel as well. But in terms of advocacy or letting people bring awareness, we both want the other industries or other communities to know about us, because we do have a great community here. But the more important thing in the long run is actually to create something so interesting or that draws people in, especially with these digital streams that we do, that we can get interest from outside of Winnipeg and maybe even draw some other developers here. We have a growing community, but you know, the community being what it is, very welcoming and very strong, I think is a great way to bring people in. But also Manitoba has some particular strengths that are unique to us, especially compared to other places in, say, the United States, like tax credits and things that people need to be aware of. I mean, developing here in Manitoba with the community and other incentives, it makes it one of the best places in North America, if not the world, to develop video games, especially if you're, you know, well, it doesn't even matter, small or large firms. Tonight's event specifically is called Games We Love. It's basically 10 talks that are 5 minutes each, and each talk is about a single subject of a single game. We chose this format because, for one, we wanted to have a lot of voices involved, a lot of speakers. For the first talk in, we want to sort of give a good overview of different elements of the industry, but we also didn't want to make it too businessy or too self-promotional, while still inserting educational elements. So by choosing other games and making sure everyone would choose sort of a game that everyone's heard of, there's not a lot of groundwork. You don't have to waste time establishing a basic knowledge. You know, one of the talks is about Zelda. Almost everyone understands Zelda. And so it allows us to dive into that one element, takes this sort of, takes the pressure off it needing to be like you representing your own company or your own game or your own projects, and makes it just a lot more open and free to sort of explore ideas. And then through that, educating, you know, other games are the best teacher, essentially. And with that, our roster actually represents a lot of the community. There's, you know, executives from studios here. There is artists and programmers and musicians. There's both freelance and, you know, full-time workers. And that's really what makes Winnipeg special, is there's not a lot of, you know, elitism. Everyone can come together to put on an event like this. And that's why we wanted this first event to have short talks so that we could make it as inclusive as possible. Yeah, and like I said, this is only the beginning. We plan to kick this off. We have other talks in development, other events, currently all digital, obviously. And from there, we'll go forward. So this is the part in the original stream where I handed it off to Daniel. But he also lost his element of the opening of the very first introduction. So I'm just going to do the first introduction, but know that all the subsequent intros are going to be done by Daniel, who sort of did all of the bio reading and everything. So the first talk is actually by Graham Weeb, and it's called Teaching Game Mechanics in the Witness. Graham is the lead effects artist at Tangent Animation. And with the recent release of the Netflix original Next Gen, Graham has done effects work for numerous films and games, including mobile and VR projects. Graham's actually had a chance to work with a lot of companies in the city as well. He's done a bit of work on the early stages of Last Taxi. I know he's worked at Flipside, and now he's at Tangent, and he's a great asset to the community. And if you follow his Twitter, you'll see that he makes some really awesome effects. His handle is at igdawinnipeg. VIN7. And I encourage everyone to follow him. All right, on with the show.
Hey everyone, this is Graham Weeb, and today I'm going to be talking about teaching game mechanics in The Witness. The Witness is one of my favorite video games of all time. It's a puzzle game. There's a bunch of reasons to play it. Here's some of them right here. And basically the core is that you should really play this game, and I'm actually going to be spoiling the first 30 minutes of it. So if you want to make sure that you don't have anything spoiled for you, you might want to skip out on the next 5 minutes. But almost 100% of the game is teaching the game mechanics, and it does this without ever presenting a tutorial in front of you. It always is done organically and in just a really well done way that allows you to discover the game's mechanics instead of just explicitly telling you these are what the rules are. So the game starts off with teaching you about drawing the core mechanic of drawing these lines on these panels. You start at the big circle at the bottom and you go all the way up to the little nub up at the top. And when they try to teach you a new aspect of this mechanic, they generally put a few panels in a row like this to show off the new mechanic. In this case, this is about collecting these dots. So you have to collect all of the dots in order for your line to be considered a valid answer. And here we've got a panel that shows a rule about symmetry. So when you draw on one side, this is horizontal symmetry. So the other side is mirrored perfectly with the way that you draw your line. It's also got diagonal symmetry, and this vertical symmetry one here also has some of those dots there. So they're mixing those two mechanics together. And all of that is a bit of a preamble to this right here. And this is what I wanted to talk about because this is a set of 6 panels that is trying to actually teach something quite subtle and a subtle aspect of the symmetry mechanic. So when we approach this panel, we approach from the right side. So we are coming in from the right. We approach it from the right side, we see the rightmost panel is the one that's active, and when we solve that puzzle, the next puzzle over becomes active, and it keeps going down until we've filled out the entire panel, which looks like this. And the core mechanic that this is trying to teach is that when you are doing a symmetry puzzle, the line that you control is always the blue line, and the symmetry line is always the yellow line. And so the first panel that they give you, this one right here, you cannot solve it any other way than starting on the left side. If you start on the right side, that puts the blue line there, and if you try to complete the puzzle that way, you get a nice big red error line saying you have to start over. And when you approach this from the right side, and it's the rightmost panel, chances are you're actually going to start on the right side and encounter this issue. Now, you could also start on the left side, at which point you continue going forward and you get to the second puzzle, which is also solvable on the left side, but then you hit a roadblock on this third puzzle here where you have to start on the right side of the puzzle. There's no other way around it. So if you've been establishing a habit of always starting your puzzle on the left side, this puzzle right here will stop you from uh, not learning about the mechanic. So you either find out about the mechanic in this first puzzle here or the third puzzle here. And at that point, unless you were completely randomly picking back and forth, it is unlikely that you will have not discovered this subtlety at this point. And if it is the case that you have just randomed your way through it, there's 3 more puzzles to stop you from not learning the mechanic until the end. So the likelihood of you solving all 6 of these puzzles before learning the mechanic is actually very, very low. And this is one of the things that I really, really like about The Witness is that at no point did it pop up with a text box saying, hey, you have to control the blue line and that the yellow line is the mirrored line. It just engineered a situation where you are more likely to discover that rule for yourself. So the fact that it's not necessarily the difficulty of the puzzles, but the order in which they're presented, how they're presented, that is giving the best opportunity for the person to discover the mechanics on their own. And that's one of the things that I think The Witness does really, really well. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of the time listening to the other talks. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to thank Graham for volunteering and contributing his knowledge and sharing his passion for the game, The Witness. And yeah, so we'll kind of jump into the next speaker here. Just gotta read this. So our next speaker is actually going to be Amy Girardi, and they are going to be sharing why they love the art in Wind Waker. Amy is an illustrator and a game developer currently working as a freelance artist. She usually has a variety of projects on the go, from making prints and books to marketing materials and art assets for games. She's contributed her art to numerous projects as a frequent Game Jam participant, including several that have grown into larger titles, such as Sort the Court and Mirror Mortis. She frequently forgets that her tea is still steeping. That's an important distinction there. So if you just bear with us as we get Amy set up here, we'll be good to go.
Hello. So here is what I love about the art in the Wind Waker, otherwise titled Visuals That Make You Believe. So what do I mean by visuals that make you believe? Well, what makes you feel like you believe you're in a fantasy world and not a video game? I don't want to focus on what makes a game aesthetically impressive, but rather what about the visuals makes you believe you're in a real and interesting place to explore. I personally wanted to talk about this because as open world games got more and more popular, I started sometimes seeing environments get bigger, but with less time and effort spent on making them visually immersive. Which brings me back to Wind Waker, a small open world game that imposes smart limitations on the size of its world and the complexity of its visuals, and it's still charming, fun, and lively to explore. So here are 4 things I think Wind Waker's visuals do that make you immersed in the world. One is variety. So Wind Waker has a variety of environments, and they all give you different feelings and moods. Within those environments, we also see a nice variety in color, shape, pattern, and lighting. It turns out that contrast makes things interesting. If we take a look back at our image of an environment that isn't terribly immersive, we can see that there's little variety in shape, color, pattern, or lighting. Number 2 is specificity. The art assets in Wind Waker are given more character by making them more specific. A bit of art can almost always be described as more than what it is. So what I mean by that is, here's the Forsaken Fortress, and we can tell that it is, in fact, a fortress, but we also get the impression that it's well guarded because of the searchlights. If we look at the back of Link's boat, we can see wood grain and worn edges, implying that the boat's traveled a long way. This large door looks imposing because of the giant size and spikes on it. We can assume that there's something scary on the other side. These details fill in the world with character and give us extra information. So if we look at these 2 rocks, it's hard to say anything about this one. It kind of looks like mashed potatoes, which is generally not something we say about rocks. But if we look at this one, we can see layers, nicks, cracks, worn edges. This tells more of a story than this one. Number 3 is dynamism. So when I say dynamism, what I mean is that the world is alive. It's moving and changing. We see this with the ocean changing between larger and smaller waves, stormy and sunny, day and night. The swirly particle effects look cool, but they also show us that our actions influence the environment around us. The people and living creatures show that the world is populated with more than just Link and the monsters you have to beat up for gameplay reasons. And the expressions. The character expressions in the Wind Waker are so good. I love watching Link react as he realizes he's about to be catapulted in a barrel over the ocean. The expressions are just another example of how the Wind Waker universe feels alive. 4 is history. So if number 3 was about how the Wind Waker exists and feels alive, the world of Wind Waker exists and feels alive, 4 is evidence that has always existed. The moss growing on the roofs and windfalls suggest time has passed since the buildings have been built. The path suggests people have walked on the grass enough that it no longer grows. People talking in the streets and the child gang known as the Killer Bees suggest that citizens have a history with each other and their relationships formed while you weren't around. The hole behind the prison suggests that someone tried to escape once or stashed their treasure back there or something. And of course, there's the history of Hyrule. Secrets locked away in ancient temples and castle ruins. They suggest that maybe the world wasn't always this way. And that is some of the reasons why I like the Wind Waker.
So I wanted to thank Amy for contributing to this event. It's nice to see like different people contributing their passion and different aspects of games they enjoy. So our next speaker here is going to be Gabriel Lescano. So Gabriel is going to be sharing a topic within Diablo 3, and that's going to be continuous collision detection. Gabriel is a computer engineer with a master's in digital marketing, and he is also a Unity certified developer, working as the CTO at Bitspace Development that loves making games. And there are two topics that he enjoys. It's game physics and teaching, dealing with the complexity of simulating the real world in a game is what's fulfilling to him, and sharing his knowledge brings him great satisfaction. And he strongly believes that you never stop learning, but the key is to pursue what you're really passionate for, and that's his way of life. So if you just bear with us as we transition here, we'll have Gabriel Lescano.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gabriel Lescano. Thank you, Daniel, for that introduction. And I am the Chief Technology Officer at Bitspace Development. And today I want to talk about Diablo 3, and specifically the continuous collision detection. So why I chose this topic is because I love physics engines. And Diablo 3 did a great job when they developed a Domino to be able to track the real physics in the game. If you have played it before, you will notice that you can attack the enemies and they will bounce into the walls without going through the wall and things like that. But before we go into the topic of continuous collision detection, or CCD as I will refer, let's back a little bit up. So games are basically based on time steps, and specifically they are like discrete frames. And what we are doing is that we are just placing those frames in front of each other to create the illusion of animation and movement. And this works pretty well with animations and rendering. But when we talk about physics, there's a bunch of things that can happen, and we need to think about what's all the events that are happening between those frames, right? And specifically, one of the topics is the collisions. So if we look here at this ball that is bouncing in the ground, when we see it in the real life, it's like this is easy. And you may think nowadays with the engines that we can use for games that it will be pretty easy to do. But it's not, because you need to think about what's going to happen when the ball is moving in just a discrete frame rate through the space. It could go through. And that is what is called tunneling. So I have a better example here, and I can show you. For example, we want this ball to just bounce with this wall, and what we expect is that the ball, when it hits the wall, because we need to collide, we need to overlap for a moment to be able to track the collision, and it will go back. But in reality, in games, when we are just doing straight games, what can happen is that our T, for example, 2 is going to be here, and T3 is going to be here. So it actually never overlapped the other surface. But what happened between was a collision. So that's when we come into play and say, okay, we need to do continuous collision detection. There are many techniques to overcome these sorts of problems. And thankfully we have physics engines that are already built in Unity and Unreal that help us to do this without even thinking about it. So when you start doing games, probably if you have done, you don't really think about the collisions, you just let it go. So let's go and talk about Diablo a little bit. So they developed this physics engine called Domino, and as you can see here in this little clip, you see that zombie that is hitting the wall in the background is not going through the wall, it's not going through the house, or it's not getting stuck in the house or anything. And this is something that is like you will think is easy, but it's actually pretty complex to do because that object, the zombie, is a ragdoll. It has limbs and it's a complex structure, right? And it's also not a static object. That has to collide and it has to track all the possible things that can happen. Because when we were talking about the ball, it was easy because it's rounded and it doesn't matter the rotation or anything like that. But in this case, this is way complex. And then when we start talking about, I'm just going to put a little bit more slow motion here. When we talk about two not static or dynamic objects that are colliding between each other in time, so they are moving, we have to do way more calculation to be able to track correctly the collision. If not, then because if we go through the approach of just like predicting what's going to happen in the future and saying, okay, the ball is going to hit the wall in the future, so I'm just going to prevent of the ball going through from the beginning. That's not going to work if the wall moves, because then the ball will just bounce in an invisible wall basically. So this is one of the reasons that I really like this game. Like you can see how the game was perfectly made in the physics engine as well, and it's something that we always overlooked. So if you guys love and really like physics and games, I will encourage you to go and do some research about CCD. There's tons of videos about it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I wanted to thank Gabriel. I had an opportunity to work with Gabriel, so it's nice to kind of have things come back full circle to some degree. And yeah, I wanted to thank him along with everyone else that's spoken so far. Our next speaker is Wyatt Thompson. And Wyatt is sharing a topic, a minimalist approach to an open world in Shadow of the Colossus. And Wyatt is a programmer at Ubisoft Winnipeg, and while being very passionate about video game design, while not currently working in game production, the work Wyatt does is involved in the tech and tools for the next generation of games. My apologies, I kind of blundered that a bit. Wyatt spends far too much time thinking about video games and actually making them. This, however, has led him to develop some very good opinions about game design, which he will now be subjecting you all to. Keyword subjecting. So if you bear with us as we transition to Wyatt here, he'll take it away.
It's empty. Now, obviously, there are some caveats and some explanations for this statement, which I'll be getting into right away. So first of all, as an example of a different kind of open world design, we have here Skyrim's map. As you can see, there's a large number of locations to visit. And personally, for me, I feel that games that take this direction tend to feel like a bit of a checklist of things to complete. And I know how ironic that might sound, considering that I work at Ubisoft. However, if we take a look at Shadow of the Colossus's map, you'll see that this is by the time you finish the game, this is the most amount of information the map will ever show you. The only places that are really important for the player to go are towards the Colossus fight, and that leaves the rest of the map to be explored by the player. As a side note, there are also collectibles, like the fruit and the lizards, but the game doesn't really keep track of them or even tell you they exist until after you beat the game, so they don't really count for completion in any sense. So I thought I would take the time to break down a little bit of how you spend your time in Shadow of the Colossus. So I took some estimates and did a little back of the napkin math, and I found that you spend about a third of your time playing the game just staring at the back of this horse and going from point A to point B. So now I'm going to discuss why I think that actually works well in this game and why that's not a detriment. So there are three key reasons that I'll get into, but the first is that pacing is key for any game, really. Second of all, that the traversal itself is engaging, that act of going from point A to point B. And third and finally, I think that the environment itself is a character. So the pacing. It's very important that the game has a break for the players between each of these like intense, long boss fights. If you just had to go back to back to back doing these big fights, I think the game would, well, first of all, be completed a lot quicker. But second of all, it would sort of degrade the experience of each boss fight. And I think that the boss fights really need this space of quiet time around them to build the anticipation towards them. Second of all, I think that the traversal itself is really engaging. I think that the assumption that, just going from point A to point B, that there's no gameplay there is false. That constitutes gameplay. First of all, the horse is just really detailed and realistic. It feels like you can feel each, hoof landing on the ground. The player guidance as well as diegetic. There's a sword beam that you follow towards your next objective that also helps keep the HUD clear. And if I had to pick a game that is essentially built on this principle, it would probably be Death Stranding. It is a game built around the idea of traversal being engaging. Finally, I would like to take some time to talk about the environment as a character. So what I mean by this is not that the environment has lines or dialogue or anything like that. What I mean is that it has importance in the narrative that is equal to that of any of the individual characters. So first of all, obviously the aesthetic appeal. I mean, you've been seeing screenshots of the game throughout my presentation. Second of all, the environment is characterized by these unforgettable landmarks, and two really important ones would be the very long bridge and the massive shrine. I think that those stick out in anyone's mind when they think about this game. And finally, I think that the exploration is primarily self-motivated. So your reasons to explore the environment are goals that you set for yourself, not because you were driven towards it by any of the game systems or any content, but that the environment itself felt that it was worth exploring, that you wanted to see what was around the corner, just to see maybe another gorgeous view or something, an interesting structure, just something in the environment that gives you motivation to explore it on its own. So an example of how I can concretely prove to you that the environment is a character, when you're on the back of your horse and you're riding through the fields, the camera will pull back to show you as much as possible of your environment, and your character becomes very small on the screen. In the exact same way, when you're on the back of a Colossus, the camera will pan back, your character will be very small, and the size and the scale of the Colossus will be emphasized by the exact same camera movement. So if there had to be one key takeaway why I love this game, it would be that the environment itself has inherent value and is not a container for content. That's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to hear the rest of the speakers' talks.
Okay, another great presentation. Along with everyone else, I wanted to thank Wyatt for contributing his topic, and we'll just jump right into the next speaker. So the next speaker is going to be Rachel Husen, and they are sharing why they love how suspense is created in Little Nightmares. As a former digital media director for an e-learning production company, Rachel was a part of the first virtual reality project in Manitoba in 2013. In 2014, Rachel co-founded Flipside XR to focus her artistic efforts on exploring this emerging new medium as their CCO. Rachel has a strong involvement in the local interactive digital media community. She is vice chair of the New Media Manitoba Board of Directors, co-founded the Winnipeg Alternate Reality Club and sits on various digital media program advisory boards. So if you bear with us here as we transition to Rachel.
So, hi everyone, my name's Rachel, and today I just thought I'd chat a little bit about why I love how suspense is created in the game Little Nightmares. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, Little Nightmares is a horror-themed puzzle platformer developed by Tarsier Studios. It was released back in 2017 with a follow-up coming up at some point this year. So in the game, you play as a character that's on a ship or a vessel called the Maw. You start the game in the hold of the ship with pretty much zero context of the story, and you're kind of left to put it together on your own as you progress to the upper levels. Now, the game developers do an amazing job at creating suspense and keeping you feeling completely stressed out throughout the game. So for me, it had a similar feel to something like Silent Hill, but it's presented in this beautifully cute and dark way. And I guess at the highest level, it's the theme of the unknown that creates suspense throughout the game. So all of the characters have this element of mystery. The lighting is really carefully crafted to hide and reveal things. There are these visual hints that are scattered throughout the gameplay that kind of only half paint the picture of what's going on. So you play as a little girl named Six. You never see her face. She's always cloaked in this yellow raincoat. She's super frail and tiny in comparison to most of the other characters in the environment. And she suffers from these hunger pains throughout the game. So you know she's probably not in a good situation, but you never really know exactly what that situation is. There are also a bunch of gnomes in the game. And for the most part, they're afraid of absolutely everything. At first, when you see them, they're running away from you. Sometimes they're looking for a hug. Sometimes they're following you around. Sometimes they're caged. When you first meet them, you don't really know if they need your help or if they're trying to trick you into something. And there are also a bunch of captured children in the game. So when you encounter them, some are actually dead. Some are in straight up cages. Some are behind bars, but kind of like in this orphanage-like setting. And you can't communicate with them, but they are the most similar to your character. So you're kind of left always wondering if you're actually one of them that just happened to escape. Now, on the upper levels of the Maw, the upper levels are filled with these morbidly obese, grotesque guests. They seem to be only interested in gorging on an unknown type of meat, and they're always like laser focused on eating in this super uncontrollable way. So aside from character design, light also plays a key role in crafting that suspenseful feel in the game. The environments are almost all super dimly lit, and the lighting is always that shippy lighting that's overhead and super harsh and is always swaying with the movements of the water. The character that you're playing with is also only armed with a lighter, which is just strong enough to light the area around you. And it's constantly flickering and can be blown out at times, and it really just feeds into that panic feel. Light's also used as a game mechanic, so it plays a really key role in some of the puzzle. It obviously gives you the ability to see and stay safe. It's used for your checkpoints, but it can also put you in grave danger at certain parts. And there are also these super cryptic visual hints throughout that paint this like really sinister story as you play. So the game starts off in this blurry dream sequence, and you see this woman, and you don't really know if she's someone you love or someone that you're scared of. If you're trying to find her or running away from her. Towards the end of the game, you realize that she's actually the final boss, but your relationship to her and exactly what she's doing on the Maw is still super unclear. A chunk of the game also revolves around the kitchen and the meat the guests are eating. So there's quite a few scenes that show the processing of meat, like these large wrapped up pieces, bloody grinders, these scary chefs that are preparing enormous steaks. But nothing really definitively reveals what kind of meat it is. And in one of the DLC extras, you see that the gnomes actually cast shadows in the shape of children. So it opens up the stories of the gnomes a little bit, but not enough to know exactly who they are or what they're doing there. So all in all, pretty much every aspect of the game is shrouded in mystery, which makes you weary of absolutely everything as you play. For me personally, I'm always drawn to these visually beautiful games that have big emotional triggers. And this is one that's definitely at the top of my list.
Awesome, another presentation. I wanted to thank Rachel as well. It's really interesting having been a part of this event and watching these presentations. These aren't games that maybe I typically would indulge in. So I'm finding this is like a really great opportunity to get outside of your own perspective. It's easy just to end up playing the same games. I stay away from horror games, so it was great to get her thoughts on that subject. So to jump straight into it, just one moment with me here. So our next speaker here is going to be Matthew Plouffe. He is going to be sharing level and world design in Super Mario Bros. 3. He was born and raised in Winnipeg. Matthew grew up on the golden age of 8-bit video games. After graduating from the University of Manitoba with a degree in film studies and philosophy, Matthew had a moderately successful run as an independent filmmaker before finding his passion for programming. Once he got into coding, his love for art and video games drove him to get involved in the indie game community. Matthew is currently living his dream, working as a tools programmer for Ubisoft Winnipeg. So if you just bear with us here, we will get Matt's presentation set up and we'll be good to go. So just bear with us.
And I'm here to talk about why I love the level and world design of Super Mario Bros. 3. And basically, I'm just going to gush about this game for 5 minutes because I just love this game. It's one of the greatest games ever made. So let's go on a tour of Super Mario Bros. 3. And it starts right off with World 1, Grass World. And when you start this game for the first time, already it's like the overworld. This is so much more epic than Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2. You have branching paths where you can choose which level you're choosing. You have these fortresses with doors that block your paths. You have the Koopa encounters, and you have the castles. You have all these new mechanics to explore. You also have items. You have the toad houses, which give you items, and then you can use them in the levels. Suddenly there's strategy involved. Do you use that fire flower? Do you save it for a more difficult stage later on? There's a strategy level that's added to the game that's so much more fun to play. And I can't talk about this game without talking about the brilliant level design, because it's just truly a great example of intuitive level design and naturally exploring mechanics. So right off the bat, at the beginning of stage 1-1, you have all these jumping mechanics. Either it's encouraging you to jump to get the coin blocks there, and you can take this path over these blocks, or you can lead up and over this piranha plant. All these ways of exploring the jumping mechanic as you first start the game. Next thing you encounter is this Koopa, which you naturally kick, and you discover how you can hit these blocks from the side and unlock power-ups. And then the shell just gets out of your way nicely. It's a nicely designed stage. Then there's this rampway, which naturally leads to chasing up these coins into the sky, and you just see this organic ability introduction. It's very similar to what Graham was talking about in The Witness, in that it's just, you don't need to explain it to you. You just explore and learn through playing. So World 2 is Desert Land, which I always thought was really applicable because Super Mario 2 always felt like a very deserty game to me. Maybe I just spent too long trapped in those levels where you have to dig through the sand. But it introduces some more interesting new mechanics, like there's a sand pit, there's a pyramid. But my favorite part of this map is this rock up here. At first, you don't notice it, and it's easy to skip. And then eventually you realize that you can break it, and it opens up the rest of the map. It's so elegant and such a subtle, simple design concept, and it's so beautiful. It's just hidden in plain sight. I just love it. World 3 is Waterland, and this was the first map where I started to realize that the map locations give you hints in terms of the level content. So you can see World 1, it's completely a swimming stage. Level 2, it's kind of a little bit of land over water, and Level 4 is completely over land. Also, shout out to this giant fish, gave me so much anxiety growing up getting chased by that thing. The overworld map is also much more complex. There's this spade house, which is very tempting. There's the green bridges, which open and close, which restrict your access to some stages. And then you can also take the boat to explore out in terms of the islands. And you can't even see where the castle is until you eventually explore out there. And then you can see these islands that are shaped like Japan, which is a nice little Easter egg. Next is Giant Land, and you never forget the first time you see Giant Land and the sprites that are 4 times their size. The levels end up being a little more simplistic and much more linear, but the technical feat of this gigantic land and just the way it feels like it expands the scope of the game is much more worth the simpler stages. Level 5 is Skyland, and this is another beautifully designed map. You start on the first half of the map, and eventually you take the spiral tower up into the sky, and you can see the land over in the back there. It's just another beautiful little design touch. This is another example of a breakdown of level. This is level 5-9, and there's literally only 3 platforms in this entire level, and you have to traverse the entire level by jumping on the backs of bugs across the map. It's just a great level. Level 6 is Iceland, and this is a whole world designed around one game mechanic. So it's just exploring all the different ways you can use ice. The map, again, is much more complex. You have these branching pathways. You can either go to level 2 or level 3 in order to get to the first fortress, either level 5 or level 6. Level 5 is a whole puzzle, even to just solve. And level 9 and level 10, again, another branching pathway to get to the last fortress. Level 7 is Pipeland, and this is just anxiety and pipes for me. You look at this map and you don't even know where you're supposed to go or how you're supposed to get from one area to the other. It feels like it's like a maze in and of itself. And then there's those little muncher plants, and there's stages which were just a nightmare growing up. It's just so much. You feel the tension ramping up as you go deeper into the game. Also, compared to level 4, where we had a much simpler level design, this is where the level design really ramps up, and they're puzzles. You have to go back and forth in these maps, traversing them in order to figure them out. There's also the horizontal wrapping stages, so they're even introducing new mechanics into the game, even this late into the game in level 7. And then, of course, level 8, Darkland. I mean, that's just everything you want from a last level map. I mean, that just looks so metal. And then it's, of course, the ultimate skill challenge. They have the tank stage, the boat stage. You have those hands, which, again, just so much anxiety when you're young, trying to get your way across there and hope you don't get grabbed. And then the flying sub. All these levels are just the ultimate challenge and the ultimate culmination of all the skills you've been playing throughout the game. And so it's just amazing to me that for an NES game, this has so much to it. This world is so huge. Worlds 1 through 8. It's just it's even now I play this game and it feels so much bigger. It feels so much bigger than just a simple NES title. So that's some of the reasons and some of the key highlights of why I love Super Mario Brothers 3 so much. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I wanted to thank Matthew. On a personal level, I've had the opportunity to get to know Matthew on a personal level, and he's a really good dude. So it's nice to have him involved in this event and sharing his wisdom. I've had an opportunity to chat with him again, as I mentioned, on a personal level, and it's nice to be able to kind of share the like teddy bear that is Matthew. I mean that as a compliment. Anyways, so our next speaker is going to be Mike Safiolis. Mike is sharing, his topic is environment art in Destiny 2. And Mike is the lead technical artist at Zenfry Inc., bringing his passion for pushing polys and wrangling nodes to work on their latest project, The Last Taxi. A lover of procedural wizardry, model efficiency, and solving the toughest technical challenges, Mike designs models, bakes, and implements procedural workflows using a variety of 3D tools, but has a particular fondness for designing complex procedural assets in side effects Houdini, deploying shaders and visual effects in Unity, and creating beautiful, efficient textures in Substance Designer. So if you bear with us as we transition to Mike and his topic, environment art in Destiny 2.
Hey, I'm Mike. I'm the technical artist at Zenfry, currently working on The Last Taxi, and I'm going to be talking about why I love the environment art in Destiny 2. So just for some context, Destiny is a fantasy science fiction online shooter. You fight aliens with space guns and space magic. For the setting and plot, it takes place on a very grand scale and it's kind of set in the far future. The game story takes you to other planets, different moons, and even alternate realities entirely. I'm just going to be talking about 2 things specifically that I love about the environment art. One being the sky, and the other being the use of lights and volumetrics. So the sky can often be an underutilized thing in environment art, but Destiny skies are more often than not just full of color and detail. Destiny is one of the only games that I've played that I stop to look up at the skybox in every new environment that I enter. A really good example of this level of detail, besides what we're looking at here, is one of the playable spaces in the game on Mercury. And Mercury, if you didn't know, is the innermost planet in our solar system, so it's closest to the sun. So Destiny communicates that fact with what I think is a really impressive skybox on Mercury, and that's what it looks like. So not only are the skies really beautiful, but you can even do some environmental storytelling up in the sky too. For example, in the current season of Destiny's content, the sort of greater evil of the game world has arrived, and there are these menacing looking pyramid ships. and to show us this like narrative beat, Bungie's using the sky. So what better way to show players that there's like a significant looming threat in the story than to like literally have it loom menacingly in the sky, right? Bungie takes a space that can sometimes be an afterthought when you're building a world, and they fill it with like really impressive art, and there's even some storytelling that can take place there. The other thing I want to talk about in Destiny is the use of light and volumetric effects. They make pretty heavy use of them throughout the game. I think like atmospheric, foggy elements like the one in this screenshot really help give the feeling of like the unknown, which is important to this kind of fantasy game. I also really like these effects can make areas like the kind of distant moon terrain here like a lot more interesting. Rather than, you know, be a relatively flat sea of terrain, the light from the sun is having like a really profound effect on the appearance of the terrain. And lights are also a great way to kind of wash an area in color. The blue tones in this screenshot are making what would otherwise be, again, kind of a gray area because this is on the moon. It's making it look a lot more interesting. And the harshness of the light is adding a lot of like visual interest to the area too. There's some shadows being cast. You can see light reflecting brightly off of like these nearby objects. Like this one light in this area is doing like a lot of heavy lifting, I think. Another great use of lights is to serve maybe a more practical level design purpose. So this is a view towards the same area that we were looking at just from really far away. You can kind of see the lights kind of standing out from the rest of the environment. It's the same blue light source we just looked at a second ago, but it's kind of calling you over. It's saying like, oh, check me out. So if we go over there, we may notice that there's a light inside this little building here. In the game, it's actually flickering even to be like even more attention grabbing. So being a video game player, I'm gonna go check out the shiny thing. So we go into the doorway, and there's a volumetric effect right in front of us, and it's kind of telling us like, hey, there's light shining upwards here. Like maybe there's something there to check out. So we're gonna go in there, and the lights are kind of creating this like breadcrumb trail for the player to follow. So we can continue on this corridor. There's some like glowy green fog stuff here that kills you if you fall in it. I know that because I fell in it. So anyways, what Bungie's doing is rather than just present the player with a path, they're kind of like leading you down that path with little tiny questions like, oh, what's in there? Like, oh, what's casting that light? You know, like, what's this round thing over here? Like, go check that out. So we make our way through this passage. We get to what's called a lost sector, which are just like little tucked away environments that have a combat encounter and a boss. But I think this one specifically is a really good example of like strong light use in environment art. So again, rather than have like gray moon cave stuff everywhere, we have like blue tones, we have green tones, and there's even some yellow over in like the top right corner of the screen. So what the environment is doing is it's actually communicating three things to you just with the lights. It's telling you, number one, you can't go straight or you're going to fall in the green stuff, and that's bad. Number two, the yellow light kind of implies that there's something up on that ledge to check out, but it's out of reach, so how do you get there? And number three, it's telling you that the path forward is like immediately to the left where the blue light is, because it's kind of like the closest shiny thing we can go and check out. I think it's important to keep in mind that players can kind of visually understand these things, whether they realize they are understanding them or not. Light's like a really good way to attract attention to something that you want the player to pay attention to. My slides. I had slides that I forgot to go through. Okay, that's the end. So those are just two of the many things that many reasons why I love Destiny's environment art. The amount of detail that they put into the sky is like really impressive and it helps sell the grand scale of everything, and the heavy use of like light and volumetric effects I think is not only good looking but kind of helps the sense of like alienness and feeling of the unknown. Yeah, that's the end.
Awesome. Along with previous speaker Gabriel, I've had a chance to work with Mike directly, both directly and indirectly, and so it's nice to get a perspective outside of the professional work environment where he's sharing a topic that he's passionate about outside of his work that he's also passionate about. But with to get straight into it, our next speaker is going to be Liam Berry, and he's going to be sharing a topic within Cave Story, and that's going to be the 8-bit orchestration. You know, I tried. Anyways, Liam is a composer for film, games, and other media. He's been writing music since he was really small and hopes that he can keep doing so until he's really old. Whether it be for films, video games, theater, concert, or anything else, he also plays piano and teaches out of his home in Winnipeg. When he's not making noise with instruments, he enjoys making noise by working in the garden and getting stung by his bees. Interesting. Or not making noise at all by reading about his chosen obsession of the week. So just bear with us as we transition to Liam.
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm a freelance musician, and I make music for films, games, other stuff. So I'm going to talk today about Cave Story and its music. Specifically, its 8-bit orchestration. So first off, what is Cave Story? So, whoops. Ooh, there we go. Cave Story is a 2004 game by, I'm going to get this horribly wrong, Daisuke Ameya, who goes by Pixel on the internet. And it's really cool. It was made entirely by this one person. And it was a pretty big game early on in the indie scene just because it was really inspiring to a lot of people. It's like, oh, you can actually make this really ambitious, large-scale game just by yourself. That's really cool. So that's kind of Cave Story. And what is orchestration is my next thing. So orchestration is the art of taking a piece of music, whether that's like a piano piece like we have here, or a sketch or anything else, and arranging that for an entire symphony orchestra. And the term is mainly for orchestras, but also refers to other ensembles. So you could orchestrate for, I don't know, a jazz band or something, or in this case, I'm going to be talking about how Pixel uses his very limited resources in this 8-bit music style to talk about, use it very limited resources in this 8-bit music style to kind of in really inventive ways. So here's an orchestration of that same piece by Ravel. You can see he's got strings and saxophones and things, kind of fleshing it all out. So I'm just going to play a quick audio example. So to flip over to Cave Story's music, I'm going to show you one well-known piece from the game called Onto Grass Town. Should work there. Okay. So here's the main little melody we have. So he has that melody starting off in this red line here, which hopefully you can all see. And then later on, he switches over and he brings in a new instrument in this yellow line. And then what he does is he has the yellow line and red line later come in together and kind of they're playing almost like complemental roles. While his earlier accompaniment instruments become a bit more melody, and then he brings in a new instrument right at the very end for a big hurrah. So he's kind of saving this last instrument for last, just to get that extra push at the end, make it this big thing. The other thing I really wanted to talk about is the way he uses one instrument to make it seem like he has more than he does. So it's this really clever use. In this piece, the Labyrinth Fight, you have these big, brappy, brass-like chords. And because he can only actually play about 8 tracks at a time, he can only have 8 notes playing at once, in his music program that he made, this is what he made to make music in the game, he has to use the melody in really inventive ways to flesh out the sound. So all we're listening to here is the silver line. No other notes are playing. And you'll really hear this with your headphones, just through clever use of panning and volume. It sounds like there's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 instruments playing at once. And in context, that sounds pretty cool. We get. So again, it sounds like there's a lot more going on there than there actually is, as the melody's kind of bouncing around. Anyways, there's a lot more to K Story's music. It's an incredible soundtrack. I really love it. It's been a big inspiration to me for years and years. And I wish we could dig into more there, but that's my talk. Thanks for having me. It was really fun to talk about this music. It's great stuff. And I look forward to making more things and seeing the other talks. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for another speaker. So we're going to jump right into the next one here, and we're going to have Z Yi. Z is sharing his topic. Their topic is going to be in Mark of the Ninja, and they're going to be talking about stealth mechanics. Z is a expert engineer and a quoterion. Yeah, let's go with that one. Wrangler at Alchemy Labs, working on VR games such as Job Simulator, Rick and Morty, Virtual Reality, and Vacation Simulator. He uses Unity and C# to create complex systems, strange mechanics, and anything in between. In the past, he has published his own game, Parallax, on Steam. When he is not working, he may be found walking his dog, eating noodles, and playing his accordion. I've also had on a personal note, I've had an opportunity to sit down and chat with Z. So I'm grateful to have him participate in this event along with everyone else. So without further ado, we're going to transition over to his screen.
Hello everybody, my name is Z, and this is why I love the stealth mechanics in Mark of the Ninja. So, Cly Entertainment, the developers behind this game, embarked on a journey to create a game with a very clear mission, and that is to make the player feel like a badass ninja, a hunter, all-seeing yet unseen, a shadow in the night, a merchant of death, yada yada. But becoming a ninja takes years and years of training the body and the mind, and ain't nobody got time for that. And so this game, within minutes, through clever design, endows you, the player, with those years of experience so that you can start the game as already the ninja that you knew yourself to be. Now, stealth games are all about playing between light and shadow, between noise and silence, but all too often stealth games, for the sake of realism and fidelity, they leave you wondering just exactly how much light can I be in? How much noise am I allowed to make? How much cover do I need? How stupid is my enemy? Now, these are all things that a ninja would just already know just by second nature, but you can finish an entire stealth game having never felt like you have achieved that level of mastery of the ninja mind. But not the case in Mark of the Ninja. In Mark of the Ninja, you're already the ninja, and so you already know the answer to all of these questions. If you're in the light, you're visible. If you're out of the light, you're not visible. It's very clear. You know exactly where that threshold is going to be because you're a ninja. You've done this before. You got this. Moving on. All right, cover. You're a ninja. You've done this a million times. You are not going to mess up something as basic as hiding behind cover, right? And so you just go up to an object, you press E, and now you are hidden. And the enemy will not see you, and that is a promise that the game makes to you. Oh yeah, and you can see sound, because of course you can see sound. You're a ninja, right? You're full-blown synesthetic ninja. Synesthetic? Yeah. You can see every gunshot, every scream, every footstep, every drop of rain, right? You can see exactly how far that sound travels. And all your enemies are these dumb guards wearing really heavy, clunky boots, and they make a lot of sound, but not you. You're a ninja. You're a tactical genius. You're wearing cloth around your feet, so nobody can hear you, unless you're running, in which case your running makes exactly this much sound, which you already knew. And yeah, if your sound reaches your enemies, they're going to aim their spotlight at you, and they're going to see you, and they're going to shoot at you, and they're probably going to kill you. But you already knew that too from your years and years of experience in your line of work as a ninja. Now, as a ninja, you can read your enemies like a book, right? Not only do you know exactly where they are, you know exactly where they think you are, which is indicated by that happy, cheery little yellow circle over there, right? That's your last known location. And this allows you to manipulate your enemies like pawns on a chessboard, right? You can make a lot of noise over here in an event, And while they're investigating that noise that you just made, you can sneak around behind them and you just slit their throat. Perfect. Another great thing about being a ninja is that over your years of accumulated experience, right, you have gained the ability to just size up your enemies just by looking at them. You can tell exactly which ones are the screamers. They're all screamers. So if you take someone's coworker's dead body and you hang it from a lamppost or something right in front of them, they will shit their pants. And that is another promise that the game makes to you. And this is my personal favorite part of this game. I miss no opportunity to terrorize my foes. And these are just some examples of the excellent array of stealth mechanics in this game. They are simple, they are unambiguous, and most of all, they're reliable. And it's this simplicity, unambiguity, and reliability that fosters a relationship of trust between the game and the player. And this trust grows into confidence. And it's the confidence that's needed to pull off these incredibly fluid and dynamic and ninja-like maneuvers in increasingly difficult situations. And some people might call this hand-holding, some people might call this a watered-down stealth experience, but some people would be wrong because Mark the Ninja knows exactly what it's trying to be. It's not simply trying to put you in the same situations as a ninja, it's trying to make you feel like you are the ninja. And a huge part of that feeling comes from being able to plan and execute with the same level of confidence and decisiveness as a real ninja. And Cly Entertainment did not lose sight of that goal, and it shows. And that is why I love the stealth mechanics in Mark of the Ninja. Thank you.
Awesome. So I wanted to thank Z for being another speaker. He's another individual that I've had the opportunity to sit down with and get to kind of know on a more personal level. And I just feel really grateful to be able to have him share his experience, both through his game that he had released with Parallax, and he's been very supportive of our community, or the community overall. So it's great to have him contributing to this event. So to go into our next speaker here is going to be Noah Dector Jackson, and they're going to be sharing the Ludon narrative. My goodness, I need to learn how to pronounce these words better. The Ludo narrative harmony of Shadow of the Colossus. There we go. So Noah is actually the co-founder, CEO, and creative director at Complex Games, and almost 20-year running Manitoba-based. He is the CEO and creative director of Complex Games Inc., an almost 20-year running Manitoba-based video game development studio. So as we transition here, we will have Noah.
Hi there, I'm Noah, and I like Shadow of the Colossus. So a little while ago, I was watching this movie, Reign Over Me. If you don't know anything about it, it stars Adam Sandler, but it's not a comedy. It's about a dentist, played by Don Cheadle, who runs into a classmate from university, played by Sandler. Though it's only been a few years since he last saw him, Cheadle is shocked when his old friend seems to barely recognize him, and tries to figure out what happened to him. Now, I don't have a lot of time here, so spoiler alert on the movie's premise. Sandler's character's family, his wife and his daughters, died during the September 11th attacks. And by the point we meet him in the movie, this loss has led him to withdraw to a mostly isolated existence. So yeah, movie's a little bit of a downer. But I'm bringing this up because it also prominently features Shadow of the Colossus. And the game is really cleverly used in the film to reveal the internal conflict of this character without really any need for exposition. Throughout, we see Sandler hunched over in front of his projection screen with the Colossus' tower-like forms looming over him. Even though he has clearly mastered the game, he's shown replaying it obsessively, knocking the Titans down over and over again. And so you're probably wondering at this point, why would I bother talking about some middling movie from 2005 in a video game talk? Actually, 2007. Well, after seeing it again, the movie made me realize something about the game's mechanics and themes that hadn't occurred to me when I'd originally played it. And that is this. So for all the amazing things that Shadow of the Colossus does well, One that really jumps out at me is that its core game mechanic seems to be in complete harmony with its narrative. So, what do I mean by that? Think about the most time consuming activities that you perform in Colossus. I would say there's basically three. First off is exploring. The Forbidden Lands are huge, but the game makes all this distance a lot easier to cover by giving you a companion, your horse, Agro. And how do you interact with him? You grab him, then tightly grip to his reins and direct him where you want to go. Secondly, I think, is the ruins. Spread throughout the game is a vast series of ruins that you usually have to scale if you want to advance. How you do that is by grabbing ledges, pulling yourself up the carpet-like vinework that droops down its sheer walls. You are slowly gripping your way to the top. Finally, there's combat. Even during the game's most climactic action sequences, you barely spend any of your time shooting your bow or stabbing with your sword. The main challenge of fighting in this game is puzzling through how to scale the bodies of each colossi and navigate to their weak points, which usually involves holding on for dear life. When you break each one of these activities down to their bare essence, what you mainly end up with is a central verb: grabbing, climbing, holding on. Or one way to think about it is that you're clinging to something. This, to me, is the central mechanic of the game. And while that may not seem all that provocative, what Sandler's Colossus therapy made me think about is how much the themes of the game, and in particular the whole narrative arc of your character, are 100% wrapped up in this one performative verb. So think about that. Why is Wander, who's your avatar in the game, there in the first place? He's lost his love, and he cannot let her memory go. So by carrying her body along with him, he's both physically and emotionally clinging to her. And this, as one of the few things that the game actually explains to you at the start, is what drives him to seek out a being in the Forbidden Lands known to have the power over life and death. Even when he is warned that his request to bring her back will come at a high price, Wander does not hesitate to say that he's willing to pay it. And this is pretty much the only thing you learn about this character before he's handed over to you to play. So while you're left to take whatever path you like, and it's totally true, you could spend hours just exploring the beautiful landscapes of this world, there is only one path that the designers have left for you to complete Wander's story. At the end of the journey, after you have clung your way through the trials of pain and frustration, your success rewards you with death, freeing the dark power that you had bargained with. And if this minimalist narrative is saying anything, it's warning against holding on too tightly, of clinging to things that can only bring you pain in the long term. And that the core mechanic of the game helps communicate something so essential about its characters and themes is just one of the many reasons why I think Shadow of the Colossus is such an interesting game.
So as we wrap up here, I wanted to thank everyone for speaking. As much as I enjoy being involved with organizing these events, it's not possible without all of their speakers. So I won't go into this too much, but I wanted to thank all the speakers and everyone listening. And at this point, I'll kind of turn it over to Cory here.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. This had way less hitches than I thought. Most of them were cleaned up in the back end. So I'm really, really proud of the whole team here for bringing this first version of an event of the rebooted IGDA to life. Thank Cam, the stage manager. He got us all in and checked our mics and everything smoothly every single time. Shane helps out the infrastructure. Christian again did the beautiful interface, and Julian helped organize all that music that was at the top of the show. And all their hashtags are there. I'm just going to leave it up for a moment longer so you guys can grab them. These are their Twitter hashtags, just to be clear. I think it is always good to follow other people in your community because we have a great community. Like these guys, this is all very talented. And this show, everything from the talks to all the things behind the scenes really shows both like dedication and just a lot of talent. And I'm super, super happy about that. Now I have a couple of announcements to make in terms of the end. So there's a New Media Manitoba event coming up. with Caitlin Tremblay. It's a narrative talk. It's also done remotely, similar to this one. I encourage everyone to go check it out. Caitlin is actually great, and I've had the pleasure of working with her briefly on the last Taxi before she got scooped away by Ubisoft, and now she's moved on from there as well. But she contributed some of the characters to that game. Cappy? Well, she's at Cappy Games now, but she went to Ubisoft prior to that. Anyway, she's a very great writer, and I think you guys should enjoy that. And then, of course, there is the Game Collective Meetup, which we have. It's run by the Winnipeg Game Collective, and it's done every Tuesday of a month, the last Tuesday of the month, and it's July 28th this time, 7:30. It's also on Discord. You can check it out through following them or visiting the website. But of course, Dan Voth is the master of all knowledge about what's going on in the community. So you can always reach out to him if you have any questions about these events. And otherwise, I just want to say that the next step for us is we're going to be building a website. Christian's going to be helping with that too. So if you think that the interface here was beautiful, you can be assured that the website will be beautiful. Our hope is to actually set this up in a formal way so that we can take in donations and start to pay the great efforts of guys like Daniel, who do so many community events. That might be a while coming, but our hope is that we can build this and build this and build this so that we're a fully established group within the city who is able to do these live streams and pay people what they deserve for their hard work. Because I think tonight is a stellar example of the hard work that people are doing. I think that's great. I so much appreciate. I'm thankful for the turnout, and I can't wait to show you what we have in store for our next talks and events, which will be less complicated but no less interesting. In fact, there's so many through lines through these different talks and conversations of just like we could do whole talks on some of these subjects, of course, and we may. In the meantime, keep tuned to our social media to figure out when our next events will be rolling out. At IGDA Winnipeg on Twitter and Facebook, and you're already here with us on Twitch, so you know where that's at, and it's on the screen. Thank you so much. This I'm no longer nervous. This rocked a lot harder than I thought it was going to. So I appreciate you all. Thank you.